So in this session, we're going to look at new IDE features in PowerBuilder 2025. First, we have a legal disclaimer. Let's go over the agenda. The first thing I'm going to talk about, probably the biggest thing, is the new compiler and solution. So there's an option now with the solution format to the source code in plain text, and there's a new compiler that goes with that is significantly faster than the current compiler. There's changes to the code editors in PowerBuilder to make them much more modern. There is an option for converting MDI menus to RibbonBar. There is a Secure Connection Encryptor, and then other various enhancements to the IDE. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Bruce Armstrong. I've been using PowerBuilder since 1.0b, so I've been around a little while. I contribute to the open source PFC project. In addition to PowerBuilder, my skills are in Oracle PL/SQL, Java, C#, and C++. And this is a little bit about the company I work for. So let's talk about the new compiler and solution. So compared to the old compiler can do P code and machine code. The source code and the precompiled code are both stored in the pibbles. That's why when you hit run on the PowerBuilder toolbar, the application starts right away, because every time you save code, every time you hit the save button in the PowerBuilder IDE, PowerBuilder compiles the code and stores the precompiled code in the pibble. So there's no long compilation step when you hit run like there are with some other tools. Now, I believe this is the case. I'm 95% confident. What it generates is a parse tree, which at the time PowerBuilder came out was typically how compilers worked. And then it uses that to compile the code. And in order to compile the code, when you do, let's say, a full build, it has to scan the code 5 times because of all the inheritance. Let's look at the new compiler. Now, this is one downside. The new compiler can only do P code. It does not do machine code. However, it stores the source code in plain text files. What that means is that when we're connecting to source control, we can directly commit and push the source code files themselves. We don't have to go through the pibble anymore. So that makes interfacing with source control easier. Also, if you're aware, one of the problems you have with PowerBuilder is when you get a corrupted pibble. If you had a save that goes bad or the IDE crashed during the middle of the save, you can get some mangled code in your pibble, and it's really hard to deal with that. When the source code is stored as plain text files, that's no longer an issue. The new compiler uses an abstract syntax tree and then uses that to compile the code. That allows the compiler, that's one of the reasons the compiler is so much faster. Abstract syntax tree is a newer way of running compilers that make them significantly faster. The other thing is that it only has to perform, because it does the abstract system tree, it only has to do one scan of the code to do the compile. It doesn't have to scan it over and over again. So yeah, it's dramatically faster, for reasons we'll get into here in a bit. The old compiler is single-threaded, and it runs in the same thread as the IDE. That's why PowerBuilder crashes a lot, because it's doing background compilations on the compiler. The compiler runs in the problem, and then it's the compiler that's taking down the IDE. It's not the IDE itself. The new compiler is multi-threaded and in some cases multi-process. So this is the other reason the new compiler is so much faster, is it's not single-threaded, it's multi-threaded. And so you can get a lot more done in the same amount of time. And then it runs on a separate thread from the IDE. So if the compiler runs into the problem, the compiler may crash, but it's not going to take the IDE down with it. Now, PowerBuilder 2025 still supports the existing workspace format. You don't have to go to the new solution format unless you want to take advantage of the fact that it's got plain text source code and it's got the new compiler. If you want to take advantage of either of those or both of those, you will need to go to the new solution. The migration process is one way. There's no capability provided to convert a solution back to a workspace, just a workspace to a solution. When you do that conversion, the PBW file, the workspace file, becomes PBSLN, a PB solution file. The PBT, the target file, becomes PBproj, a project file. Folders are created for each pibble, and the source code for each pibble is written into that folder. When you do this migration, all the original files are copied into a backup files folder. So if you do decide to try it out and don't care for it, you haven't corrupted, you haven't lost your original project in the workspace format. You still have it. Anyway, so there are some functions will no longer necessarily work correctly when you do use the new solution. They're almost all related to the fact that there are no more pibbles. So particular things like library create, library delete, library directory, those are all things that are intended to operate on libraries. We don't have any libraries anymore with the new solution, so these really don't do anything anymore. And a couple functions out of PB&I, same thing. When you do create session or run application, using that PB&I function, you pass in a library list. Same thing with a lot of these metadata functions. When you're using these metadata functions, you pass in a library list. There's no more libraries, so none of these functions are really guaranteed to work anymore. That's with the solution. They'll still work with the workspace. If you stay with the workspace, those will all still work. How do we do this migration to the new solution format? Well, there's an option that says convert workspace solution in the system tree. Pretty simple. You enter a name for the solution, or just accept the one that's automatically provided. The initial pass is actually quite fast, surprisingly fast. The part that takes a while is the generation of the abstract system tree. That's a one-time process, so you'll do the migration. PowerBuilder will come back up with now it's in the solution format. So that's now the solution. These are now the projects. But you'll see this cranking away for a while. And that's the first time pass through when it generates the abstract system tree. My example here, I was doing this for the PFC demo app. It took 1 minute to do the initial abstract system tree generation. So not a whole lot of time still, but it's not instantaneous. So here's how you can tell whether or not you're using a workspace or a solution in a project. Notice the workspace. The workspace icon is like a little monitor, and the solution looks more like a window. And the bigger difference in the workspace where you have targets, that's actually a target. And then if you look at the projects, they look more like a copy icon. So it's not always obvious when you're looking at, when PowerBuilder is open and you're looking to see, you're looking at your workspace or your solution. It's not really obvious necessarily at first whether you're still using the old workspace and targets or you're using the new solution and projects. That's how to know. Particularly, I think that the thing that stands out the most is the targets. You see that big target symbol, you know your workspace and targets. You don't see the targets, then you know you're using solution and projects. So this is, Appian put out their own list of statistics. What I did is I used the PFC demo app, the Pete app. So with the old compiler, it took 4 minutes and 30 seconds to do a full build of the PFC demo app. Remember that, 4:30. With the new compiler, 1 minute and 12 seconds. So about 4 times faster, it seems. Your mileage may vary. So the new compiler, it's significantly faster than the old compiler. And it makes the IDE more stable. I mentioned that before. Because it's operating on a separate thread, and so a crash of the compiler will not take down the PowerBuilder IDE. The new solution, as I mentioned before, greatly facilitates interoperation with source control systems. Currently, with the workspace, looked in the file directory, and you notice a ws_objects folder. So every time you did a source control operation from PowerBuilder, it would have to export the source code from the pibbles to that ws_objects folder, that's what actually got put into the source control system. And then when you did a pull, it would have to take the files from the source control system, put it down into that ws_objects folder, and then re-import it into the Pibble. So it was a much more complex operation, much more prone to error, at least not to easily go in and, let's say, update those source control files manually. Let's say you wanted to do a global search and replace on them. You'd have to go into PowerBuilder after you did that and do a refresh to force it to reload the source code into the Pibbles, because you didn't change where PowerBuilder knows the source code is at. You changed the layer it uses to interface with source control. With the new solution, you want to do a global search and replace while using some third-party utility or other operations using a third-party utility. You can go ahead and do them directly because you're operating directly on the source code at that point. The IDE uses those files, and you can use third-party tools, to do some stuff like global search and replace on them. So let's look at a demo of the new compiler and solution. So the first thing we're going to look at, this is the PFC, including all the targets that come with it. So it's a multi-target workspace. And we're going to, this is in workspace format right now, because you can see the target symbols. And we're going to use the convert to workspace option. And I'm just going to take the default there. And this will go fairly quick. And it says it's converted to a solution, and then it loads it up. There we go. That panel was hidden, so you didn't see that it was actually doing work still. So it's showing it's available, but it's generating the abstract syntax tree. So it's doing each target at a time. So it took about a minute to do the generic PFC app, but it's going to go through and do these individually. So I'm going to fast forward here. Okay, so it's done, and as you can tell, because we no longer have the little target icons down here, we are now in a solution and projects rather than workspace and targets. And if I go to the File Explorer and look at the directory that this was in, let's look at the PFC libs. So here, there's a PFC main.pibble, but that's not a file anymore. That's a folder. And there's the source code files. So this is checked in with source control. This is what you could use a third-party editor to edit. This is what the PowerBuilder IDE works with. One thing I'll note, when I went to do the convert, it's no longer available there because this is it's already a solution. But when I went to convert the workspace to a solution, if this thing was registered with source control, that option would be disabled. So you're going to have to basically, if you're using Git, you can just go delete the .git folder. I'll show you here. I'll go to another one that is. Here's a workspace. This folder right here. If you delete that folder, then the workspace will no longer know that it's actually connected to source control. And then you can go ahead and do the conversion. But that brings up a point. You're not going to be able to use the same repository with the solution format that you were working with workspaces. What you're going to need to do is create a new repository now for the solution. And if you want to have your history of code changes, you're going to leave that old repository available so you can go see those changes. I don't know that there's any way to try to convert the history there to the new solution format. You'll just make that old one read only and go refer to it if you need to check for code changes. So yeah, you're going to have to create a new repository in your source control system once you've done this conversion to a solution. Okay, with that, I'm going to switch over to a couple of existing workspaces that, so this is the original workspace format, and I'm going to do a full compile here on that particular application. And because it's going to take a while, I'm going to just step into my TARDIS and advance the time here. Okay, so that's done, and we are now at 4 minutes and 7 seconds since we started, so that's how long it took to do a full compile with Workspace, let's go and open up the solution. And let's do a full build of that same application. Let's see how long that takes. And we're done there. And notice, well, even better time than what I originally reported in the slides. 49 seconds compared to 4 minutes. So yeah, the new compiler is dramatically faster. And this, you'll get the same effect if you're using PB Auto Build. If you're using the Workspace format, it will take a long time. Solution format, a lot faster. So I think that's about it. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, so that was the new compiler and solution. Let's look at the modern code editor. So one of the features in the modern code editor is bracket matching. Now it's a little hard to make out, but there's a little gray square around that first parentheses and actually around that last parentheses. And my cursor is at one of those. So that's why you get the highlighting of both of those. It finds the matching bracket, matching parentheses, matching quotation mark, and shows you where the other one is at. So particularly if you've got like a bunch of nested function calls, it helps you determine really quickly if you've got enough, if you, let's say, your right brackets on there for your nesting. Line numbers. There are now line numbers in the IDE. Now this is an option. This is the Designer Options tab that you can open up, and that's an option you can turn on or off depending on whether or not you actually like the line numbers. You don't have to use them if you don't want to. It's great for like when you want to go to a line number though. So I like to have the line numbers. Highlight current line. Once again, for all this new stuff, there is an option to turn it off if you don't like it. But so what's happening here, there is a gray line. I'm going to zoom in there a little bit, see if that makes it a little easier to see. Notice the lines above and below where it says set a reference to the control. That's an indication of what the current line is. And notice the line 85 there. Notice how that's in yellow. So that's another indication of what current line is. And once again, you can toggle that off if you don't care for that. Display white space, another option. So if you've got that checked, you get these little characters in there that indicate where you've got white space. There's actually nothing there but space. Just the display white space option makes that visible. Now I believe that one is actually disabled by default. You actually have to go in and turn that on if you want it. Word wrap. Once again, it's an option in the design options for the script editor. That's the Gettysburg Address, and I pasted it in as a single line of text and commented it out. And so because word wrap is on though, you see that single line of text as some 20 lines there. But notice the line numbering still shows that it's just one line, line 150. So that's an option you can turn on or turn off as suits your preference. Change tracking. So what I did here is when this piece of code, I added 4 blank lines. And notice the yellow bar on the left, that indicates that that's where a change is at, a change that hasn't been saved yet. Zooming, just like I've been zooming in and out here as the presentation's gone on, you have the ability to zoom. So if you're having a little trouble reading the screen, you can zoom in a little bit and see the text better. Highlight name. So now if you take, let's say, some variable reference, and what I've done here is I've clicked at the beginning of AWO and I moved to the right. And when I let go, every other place that AWO is referenced shows a little gray around it. It's really easy then to find where you've got references, let's say, to a variable throughout the script. Syntax coloring. You've probably noticed this as I've been showing you these windows. But logical statements are in blue, comments are in green, variable declaration, at least the type of the variable, is in purple. And then values are looks like is another shade of blue there. PowerScript is in kind of a yellowish. So that's a new feature, and you can change those colors as you want in the design options. So if you don't like those particular color sets, you can change them to whatever you want. Code formatting. So there used to be an option that just did comment or uncomment selection. Now we've got some other options now: make uppercase, make lowercase, indent or delete horizontal white space. That's if you get a bunch of empty white space on the right, sometimes when you're doing copy and paste and you just don't want it in the code, you can just select all the code, say delete horizontal white space, and it all gets removed. Outlining and folding. So notice we have a for statement, an if statement, and a choose statement. I'm going to zoom in one more time here. Minus signs there are actually collapsible brackets. So if I click on the one where it says choose case, it would collapse the entire choose case down to one line. Same thing for the if statement and for this for statement. So if you're trying to figure out the logic behind a particularly long set of code, sometimes it's helpful to collapse these code blocks to help you better understand what's going on with the code. Quick info: if you have the mouse hovering over a variable declaration, it will tell you the type, parameter information. So now, this is part of the auto IntelliSense or auto scripting. Specified the open with parm function. Notice it actually put a close parens on there for me. And it also shows me that there's 12 different variations of the open with parm, and you can actually click on those little arrows there and navigate through them to find the one you want if you'd like to do that. So no necessarily having to go back and refer to the help. It's something I used to have to do all the time. And do a file open and go, what are the arguments for file open again? It'll tell you right there in the IDE. Auto completion list. So now we get a little bit more content than we did with the old auto scriptor. And notice that there's some options down here where we control some options for, we can do filtering. So, basically we can customize how we get the auto completion information here. These are PFC functions. So it's actually showing you this for the code you created. Okay. It used to be that editor wouldn't necessarily prompt you with information like then block for an if statement. Now it does that kind of thing. It's a little bit more context aware and gives you suggestions now at times when it previously wouldn't do that. Debugging and breakpoint cursor enhancement. So what's going on here? Notice the red dot there. That's a breakpoint. What's really nice is all you need to do to set or unset that breakpoint, like most modern IDEs, is click right there. So if I wanted to add a breakpoint down here, I would just click in that spot. No more, going up to the menu and saying insert breakpoint. Status bar over at the right gives you your line and character numbers. The find and replace now has been improved, much smaller dialog, but it has support for regex and some other advanced search capability. Okay, I don't normally have text on my toolbars, but I did this just to show you what these options are. It's the same options that you had on the right click: make indent larger, make indent less, uppercase, lowercase, etc. But it's available in the toolbar as well. So let's go ahead and look at using the modern code editor now. And one thing I'll clarify, in case there was any questions on this, it doesn't matter if you're using a workspace or a solution, you get the modern code editor. It's not like you have to convert to the solution to get modern code editor. It's available regardless of which way you go there. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I don't really have a code sample for the new editor changes. This is the PFC sample code, PFC resize service, I should say. And it's just some code I can use to demonstrate all these different new features. So let's take advantage of the zoom. There we go. So I guess we're not doing these necessarily in the order I discussed them. Let me close this down a little bit too. Hopefully that makes it a little easier to see. So I'm going to put my cursor on that bracket, and notice how this bracket's highlighted. I'll move into that bracket. This bracket's highlighted. Every time you set focus, and this is highlighting the AW control, and notice the AW control here and here is highlighted as well. Here is your gray lines indicating that this is the current line, as well as the yellow line numbering. Of course, that is the line numbering. And of course, we've got the syntax coloring. So this comment's green, that comment's green, all the comments are green. The logical statements are in blue. Power script functions are in this kind of yellowish color. Let's see what else. So the folding. Now notice, this is interesting. The end else there is collapsible. The choose case itself is collapsible. But notice we don't have any collapse within the case blocks. And the reason that is because with a choose case, there's a corresponding end choose. It's really easy for the IDE to figure out this is the beginning and this is the end. For these case blocks, there's no like end case. There's nothing you put down here to indicate this is the end of the block. And so those can't be made collapsible. But that's the one limitation. Otherwise, for loop, the choose case is collapsible, the if is collapsible, and the for is collapsible. And okay. Let me hover over a variable there. There is your quick info. Okay. And if I go down here and start adding some lines, notice the yellow indicator on the left indicating this is new code. And I say open sheet. Okay, this is like parameter info. So now you can see what the parameters are. I'm going to put the bracket now, and I get the 1 of 6, and I can actually click through these and see what the actual different arguments are. So that's auto scripting. If I was going to be debugging this code, all I need to do is go over here to the left and click, and there is my debug. And I click again and take it off. Status bar down here. Notice I'm on line 150, character 1. Now I'm at line 62, character 37. So you've got your status bar. Let me go to design options. And one of them is view whitespace. That is, well, two of them are disabled by default. View whitespace and word wrap. So I'm going to turn both of those on. So now you get those indicators. These are actually indicators of tab. So there's your whitespace indicators. And then let me just go down here and put in a long block of text prepared. Word wrap turned on now. So see, that's just one big long line. If I go ahead now and turn that back off, I'm going to turn off white space while I'm there. And now that block of text is one big long block of text. Okay, just a couple more things to show here. Let's say I select that block of text. I can right click on it now. I can make it all uppercase. I can make it lowercase. I can increase the indent, and of course these options are available on the toolbar as well. So there's the decrease indent and uppercase, lowercase. There's also the option to delete horizontal white space, which probably would make sense if I turn so you can see it happening. Let me turn the white space indicator back on. Okay, so you notice the arrows are tabs, the little dots are spaces, and I go in here and I say delete horizontal white space, and there. So bind. Okay, much smaller dialog now. Some new options here. Match whole word, but here, regular expressions. So you can decide that what you put in here will be a regular expression. Now, I'm not a regular expression fan. I don't really understand. Anytime I have to use regular expressions, I have to Google it to figure out what I'm supposed to use. So I can't really demo that, but you can also, some options here to just do what's in the selection of the document. So anyway, that's changed as well, and that's about it. Okay, so that was the modern code editor. Let's look at converting an MDI menu to a RibbonBar. So one of the new features here is there's a new panel. When you're editing a menu, there's a new panel called Ribbon View. And what that does is allows you to specify panel text and the type of button and the button image that you would want in a RibbonBar view for the menu item. Okay, and that's going to become important because there is a new option for the MDI frame windows. This is an option called Display Menu as RibbonBar. And so if you select that, what's going to happen, and you can set it in script as well, but it's right there on the window property. If you do that, what's going to happen is that PowerBuilder is going to basically generate a RibbonBar based on that menu. And it's going to automatically display that RibbonBar. So it's not like you have to go and manually create the XML file anymore. Drop the control on the window and then populate, do the load to populate the RibbonBar with the XML. All you do is you click that button and you've got a RibbonBar. The way that PowerBuilder does this, it takes the top level options here like File and Help, and it makes those categories. Notice how I've got these dividers, these gray lines between sections. Okay, each of those is going to become a panel within the category. And the name of the panel is going to be based after the name of the first option within that group. So this will become a panel called New, this will be called a panel called Save, this will be called a panel called Print, that would be called a panel called Exit. Then all of these items will become buttons within that panel, unless they've got submenu items. So all of these, none of these actually have a submenu item, so these would all become buttons. But let's say Print Preview here actually had submenu items. Well, it would become a drop-down button then. The options that are the submenu options for the Print Preview, just saying in this case, that if it was had submenu items, those submenu items would become buttons on the drop-down button. If there were fourth level menu items, those become menu items on the RibbonBar. Okay, so it does that all automatically. But let's say you're not happy with the way it kind of auto-generates the RibbonBar. What you can do now is you can take that menu, you can right-click on it, and you can say Export to RibbonBar XML. And so it will generate the XML file that represents the default way it formatted that menu. Now what you can do is you can style it. Let's say if you wanted fewer panels, you wanted to change the names of the groups, the panels, you didn't want to necessarily have the first menu item in each section being the name of the panel. You can go change all that. And then what you do, after you've suited that to your taste, there's a new event on the MDI frame window called Menu Changed. And you go into that event, and depending on the menu that is currently enabled now, because if you've got an MDI application, normally you have a frame menu, you open up a sheet, there's a sheet menu, there may be several different sheet menus for different kinds of sheets. With the original RibbonBar view, that was tough to handle. When I did some application mods to take care of the RibbonBar, what I ended up doing was just creating one RibbonBar that was displayed regardless of which sheet was active. You no longer have to live with that now. What you can do here is you create an XML file for the frame menu, and then you create an XML file for a particular sheet. And then in this event, you say, okay, what's the current menu? If the current menu is the frame, then you load the XML file for the frame menu, the one you've modified to be the way you want. If it's one of the sheets, then you load the XML file for that particular sheet. And so what happens now with very little coding is that you open up your frame and it's got a particular ribbon bar, and then as you open different sheets, the ribbon bar switches, changes, adjusts automatically to be appropriate for that particular sheet. So yeah, really reduced a lot of coding here for the ribbon bar. Nice new feature there. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this actually works. So what I have here, I have the Pete application, the demo application that comes with PFC. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run it with no changes, so we can see just what it looks like there. Okay, so we get our standard menu up there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here and click on Display Menu as Ribbon Bar. This is on the MDI frame. That's the only change I'm going to make. Save that, run that. Voila, ribbon bar. That was pretty easy. Although, personally, I don't like this, mainly because I've got 4 groups here, 5 groups. I can learn how to count. And then I've got just a few panels. And so this ribbon bar is really squished down to the left side of the window. And I don't like necessarily the titling of the groups. So what I can do is I go to the menu item now. So here's the frame. I right click on that. I say export to ribbon bar XML. Not that that's what you want to call it, but just so I don't mess it up with something I really want to use. Get the ribbon bar builder out. Load up that file. And now I can start making changes to it. So one thing I might want to do voila, that eliminated that category and put all those buttons that were in that previous category into panels in this one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Here. One more there. One more actually. Not all of these are visible, which is why you're seeing more panels in the code than you're actually seeing in the display down here. But basically, I've moved all the categories, and now I've got one category basically across the top of the window with a whole bunch of subpanels. The images that are being used, I could rename these panels. I could do, just tailor it the way I want. Going back here to the menu painter, though, I wanted to point out, and I showed it to you in the slide, but there's the new ribbon view option here. So let's say on File, Exit, I can specify this, when I do a ribbon view, this is the icon I want to use. And I can actually change the panel text here as well. Okay, so, and that way, that would take effect if you didn't export the XML, and of course it will be in the XML that's exported. So, I'm not going to use that export that I did originally while you were watching. What I'm going to do here, I've got some where I export the frame menu and the sheet menu. And then I'm going to go into the menu change event now here on the frame. This is new. And so I just had commented out the code, so I'm going to uncomment that. just for convenience, I named the XML files after the menu. Pretty easy way to remember which is which here. So what happens is when the frame comes up, a message will be sent here saying that mpeat frame is the current menu. And then when a sheet is opened, then mpeat master would be the menu, and that the same event would be triggered on the frame. And that allows me to use the import from XML file to load in my customized XML file rather than the one that was generated by default. So let me save this. And then run that. Okay, doesn't look a whole lot different because I didn't make a whole lot of changes to the file. But you notice, one thing you don't notice because the sheet was opened automatically, is I close this sheet and we get a different menu. And then if I open again, then we get the sheet menu again. With PowerBuilder 2022, that was really hard to do. And like I said when I was showing you the slides, when I did an app in PowerBuilder 2022, I just created one ribbon view that was used regardless of whether or not sheets were open. But now you can actually have the ribbon view change as you're loading different sheets. Okay, so that's the menu to RibbonBar option. Okay, so that was converting an MDI menu to a RibbonBar. Now let's go on and look at the Secure Connection Encryptor. Now, this is available in a number of different locations. One is on, if you do the File New dialog, go to the Tools panel. It's there. It's also, if you go into the database profiles, and this is probably the easier way to use it, you can right-click on one of your database profiles and generate secure connection string is an option there. Either way, you get launched into this dialog. Now, if you did it from the database profile, it would auto-populate with the settings from that profile. If you just launch it from the tool window, this would come up all blank, and you would have to fill in the values. Anyway, you fill in your values, you hit encrypt, and you get this one string, which is the encrypted version of all of those settings. And now there are some new SQL CA methods. One is enable secure connection. That tells SQL CA you're going to want to use this new encrypted string. And then you say set secure connection string, and you pass in that encrypted value. What this means is that, let's say you don't necessarily want your developers having, basically your developers having access to the credentials you're using to connect to the database. You can give them the secure connection string, they can put it into the code, they can run the application, and it will work, but as we'll see here in a minute, they can't determine what the values are you use for that database connection. There's a third property I didn't cover yet, that secure connection property. That is if you've already set the secure connection string, but you want to change one of the values. So instead of passing in a whole new encrypted string, you can change the values one at a time. But when you do this, you're actually passing in clear text. Now, you'll pass in the clear text, but if you're in the debugger still, because it's a secure connection string, the developer can't see what the values are. So here's an example, and this will be from my demo, where I've set the secure connection, I have passed in the secure connection string, and then I've gone ahead and changed one of the values, passing in clear text. So this is what it looks like when I'm using the debugger. In this particular case, I had an error. You look at not necessarily these up here, but if you look at database, DBMS, DBParm, DBPass, log ID, logpass, server name, they're all showing as empty strings. Those are populated. It's just that the developer can't see what they are. Now the SQL text, actually came back with login failed for user DBA, which told me this was the username that I actually used for the connection. That's not PowerBuilder's fault. That's SQL Server's fault. Maybe they shouldn't be including that in their error message. Invalid username and password would be a more appropriate error message. Anyway, in the situation where you may want to restrict your developer's access to a particular database, so they can only run applications against it. They can't just get the credentials and do whatever they want. Here you go. So let's look at a demo of using the Secure Connection Encryptor. Okay, so here's my little demo application for the Secure Connection Encryptor. First thing I do is I'm going to show you, like I showed you in the slides, but it's available here on the new dialog. And you can also bring up the database profiles. And I'm going to go to MS SQL Server, right click on it, say generate secure string, encrypt it, copy it, and then run my little demo app here. I'll show you the code in a minute. I'm going to take that string I just copied, I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to connect the database. Okay, no message box. If there was an error, I would have displayed one. And do a retrieve, and sure enough, I can retrieve from the database. The secure encryption property, this is where you can take a plain text value and then replace one of the properties. I've set up my sample code so that it replaces DBMS, and I'm going to change it to the ODBC driver. And then, of course, that's not going to work. Do a connect, and yeah, it's going to pop open the ODBC profile, because that's, unless you turn off the option there to prompt for that, it ends up prompting. Yeah, so it's not going to like that at all. And now it worked again, because I said replace the DBMS with MSO, and now we can retrieve the data again. Also, let me just hack this a bit. I'm going to characters off the end there. And I'm going to leave this off. Disconnect first, connect. And, okay, yeah, it doesn't even know what the DBMS parameter is anymore, because I truncated off some of the valid text there. So there's the, let's make sure we're disconnected, connect, retrieve. Okay, so that's how all that works. Let's go ahead and look at the sample code. Mainly, I want to look at connect button. I showed this code to you on a slide in the presentation. So enable secure connection. This is a property on function actually on SQL CA. Set secure connection string. And so that's when I pass in that encrypted value that we got from the tool. And here's where if somebody would put in a value in that text field, I would have set the DBMS to it. And we did that to make it fail. And then I go ahead and do the connect. But let me show you, I put a breakpoint in here on the connect. So let's go ahead and debug this. And I'm going to put in that value I generated. I'm going to say connect. And we got a valid connection here. Let's look at, so the SQL code is 0, valid connection. But the developer isn't going to be able to get any of the connection information, because even when they run the debugger, none of the values show. So that's the Secure Connection Encryptor. Okay, so that was the Secure Connection Encryptor. Now we're going to look at some miscellaneous additions to the IDE. Now, first I'm just going to list them, and then I'm going to go into detail on each one of them. You can open objects in read-only mode. You can search by object type. You can search from the browser window, locate objects from the browser window, locate the object from the tab header, open the menu painter from the Windows property page, and there's new icons for the PowerBuilder IDE shortcut, and the database interface names have been simplified. Okay, so let's go take a look at each one of these individually. Okay, so it used to be that when you had a window open, and then you try, or an object, and then you tried to open up something that was an ancestor or descendant of that object, you would just be told, no, you can't do that. You'd have to close the original window and then go open up the ancestor or descendant. Now, you get the warning telling you, yeah, that you're about to open up an ancestor or descendant of an object you already have open. But it allows you to open the window. It just opens it up in read-only mode. And this is the indication. You see the, and I will zoom in here a little bit, the little lock icon that's in the toolbar. That's just to remind you that you've got this open and you've got an ancestor or descendant of it open, this one you can't edit. You can only edit the original one that you open. Okay, you can search by object type. So this is the search window. But now you can say, well, I only want to look for this code, this string I'm searching for in Windows or in functions or in a user object. So that will increase the response you get because you doesn't have to search so many objects. Search from the browser window. You could always do this from the system tree. But now when you go to the browser, this is the browser dialog. Now you can do a search from there, and you can also do a locate and pibble. So if you knew that you wanted to edit, PFCW child, but you didn't remember which library it's in, instead of having to open up each library individually looking for it, you can just go to the browser window, find the window you wanted to open, say locate and pibble. What it'll do is it'll locate it for you, and then you can open it. So this is an example of doing that. So I was looking for this particular window. I said locate, and it scrolled down, opened up the pibble tree in the system tree, and then it actually scrolled down. So that window I was looking for is at the bottom of the system tree. And now, if I wanted to open it, I can open it. You can do the same thing from the tab header. So you've got this window open, and you don't remember what pibble it's in. You can say locate and pibble, and it will scroll the system tree, show you which location it's in. Now this is nice. So you've got a window here. You've got a menu. You want to go edit the menu. Well, what you used to have to do is you have to go back to your system tree and open up all the pibbles and try to find that menu and then open it when you found it. Now you can right click, say modify menu, and it will open up into an editor. There are some new icons for the PowerBuilder IDE. This is something I'll pat myself on the back really hard here for. I asked for this during the beta because I've got several different versions of PowerBuilder on my machine, and I've also got a couple other programs that have icons that are very similar to the default PowerBuilder icon. And so it's not so much an issue if you're launching Office shortcuts that are in your desktop because you've got the text underneath them. I like to have my icons down in the toolbar, and the toolbar does not have text on them. It does have if you hover over it, it'll display text to show you what that icon is. But I'm often clicking around much too quickly for that, and I'll rather frequently open the wrong program because I am going too fast. So anyway, now I can choose one of these other icons to make it a little bit more obvious to me, which is PowerBuilder 2022 and which is PowerBuilder 2025. And the database names have been simplified. Along with that, some of the database interfaces are really, really old. For example, they are still providing an Oracle driver for version 9 and version 10 of Oracle. Extremely old, dinosaur age old. So what they've done now, what you really should be doing is using ORA, at least if you're using a current version of Oracle. So what they've done is they've made ORA kind of a first-class citizen in the database interface list. And they've taken those other two Oracle drivers and they've moved them under an obsolete interfaces folder, essentially. You'll see this in a minute. They did change the name of the Informix driver. The old one was called IN10, indicating version 10. The new one's just called INF for just Informix, not tied to a specific version. Now, you can still use the older drivers, not taking them away, but they do recommend that you move to the newer drivers. So this is what it looks like. Well, before I get there, this is just kind of a summary of I said the names were simplified. What was ADO Microsoft ADO.net is now just called ADO.net. ASE, yada, 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 is just called ASE. And once again, there's your INF Informix. Microsoft SQL Server used to begin with MSOLA DB SQL. Now it's just called MSO. And as most of you probably realize, only the first three characters count. So you could say MSO, and that would be enough for PowerBuilder. No change for a couple of these. This gets reduced, or for Oracle here, this gets reduced to just O10 Oracle, O9 Oracle, Olay DB rather than Olay Microsoft DB. So, and like I said, usually it's just the first 3 characters that really matter to PowerBuilder. It tends to ignore everything past that. And then these are all the current drivers, so they get shown at the first level. These are the older versions. They'll get moved to the obsolete interfaces. And then there's the one big change. This is an actual change in the DBMS value. So the new driver is just called INF rather than IN10. So this is what it looks like. So now you've got, these are your first class citizens now. These are all the current versions of the interfaces. And these are delegated to second class citizens. They are the older versions of the database interfaces. And ideally you want to move off of those pretty soon. Whenever you're trying to teach somebody something, you should tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell it to them, and then you tell them what you told them. So that's what this slide is about. We're just going to review what we've covered. We've gone over the new compiler and solution. We've gone over the modern code editor. We've talked about converting the MDI menu to a RibbonBar. We've covered the Secure Connection Encryptor. And we've covered IDE enhancements. All right, before we go, here's some ways you can stay in touch with Appian. The one I'd really recommend is the community.appian.com. That has discussion forums. There's tech articles, there's blogs. What I don't see mentioned here is there's an area where people upload code samples that other people can download and play with and use in their own applications. I think it's pretty cool. So I would really recommend going there if you're not already familiar with it. The other things are that Appian has a Facebook site, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter accounts as well. So you can follow them there. But this one in particular is a place, if you're not familiar with it, you should check it out. So with that, thank you. And it's time for questions and answers.